Should be a Casablanca somewhere.
All right, and we are live on my request. Today we watched The Fly, the 1986 Jeff Goldblum version of The Fly. This is like kind of a favorite of mine, and that's why I suggested it. I think it's just really good for what it is, so I was really excited to put somebody else through this and see how that goes down. So I'm going to push it over to you at this point, Jose, and just ask for first impressions. How do you feel about it?
I'm still processing this one. It isn't as, I'm not as automatically sold on it as I have been in the past couple movies that we've seen. Like I've been able to see past a lot of the, more questionable aspects of the past couple movies we've seen. Far easier.
You've been very generous.
Yeah. This one's just strange because for the most part, with those other movies, I always find that there's a character or a character flaw or something that I find sympathizing within the universe, within the personal universe of the movie that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, I didn't find any. Jeff Goldblum's character, Dr. Brundle. Seth Brundle. Yeah, he is not a likable character whatsoever.
So when you say that, just to clarify,
Mm-hmm.
Seth Brundle as Seth Brundle is not likable, or Brundlefly, or any variation of Brundlefly is not likable?
I personally thought that Seth Brundle, even before he had anything spliced into him, wasn't exactly that sympathetic of a character or nice of a guy. The movie starts off in medias res with him, with him being in the middle of trying to get this girl to, come home with him, essentially. Drive him home. Yeah, exactly. We have to make that very clear about the fact that this man has no car, all right?
As far as we can tell,
Yeah.
no conjecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it already, from the very beginning, it showcases the fact that the Fly didn't do too much to him, really, because he is already an individual who just from the scent of sex, let's say, from that first scene, already began to be obfuscated right away by Veronica's character, and just the prospect of sexual conquest. And I will say it in that way because it's exactly the way that he framed it, because the very first scene, has him talking to her, and she makes it very clear that she's there on professional business. She's looking for a story.
And he uses his career to get her home.
Exactly. And once he gets home, he somehow heel turns on her right away and be like, interviewer? I didn't know you were an interviewer. What? You're here for you're here about you're here about a science magazine? What? I don't know nothing about this. It was so abrupt and sleazy, really. You know what I mean? Because I mean, just looking at it from, a man's perspective, you can just see his tactic. You know what I mean? You can see the game that he is trying to play. You know what I mean? And the game is, I am a smart scientist, and this lady that I found who is in a scientific convention, right? So she must obviously have some form of hots for scientists. You know what I mean?
Is that the assumption? If you're here,
she works for a science magazine.
Scientists.
It's like a physics magazine that she works for. So she's at the nerd group.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, if talking about neutron stars doesn't get her off, I mean, who knows what will at this point, right?
Let's not kink shame here.
Yeah, no, naturally not. But at the same time, I mean, the whole point of my saying that is the fact that from the very beginning, you can really tell that he's a very calculative guy, if not manipulative, calculative.
Because he's too smart not to know that she's there for a story.
Exactly. And on top of that, I mean, his just flustered, his flusteriness after she was like, "Oh, great! Like I can actually do my job now. That you've actually shown me why I should leave, that room full of decorated scientists that I could have had an interview with, to come to a dingy warehouse where I could have potentially gotten raped and murdered at the same time, but no one ever would have been able to know. You know, like, goodness, though, the 80s must have been some time. I mean, like, just in the way that they showcase the innocuousness of people's ways of thinking, I guess, you know what I mean? Like, because this, I mean, like, the mid-1980s, 1986, when this movie was made, it was, like, hot central when it came to, like, serial killers and things like that. You know what I mean? Like, the individuals who had just begun their serial killer career in the 70s were really taking off in the 80s. And it just boggles the mind, you know, that the movie would even try to showcase this to be even a normative thing in any type of way. You know what I mean? Maybe that's just Cronenberg. You know what I mean? Making an artistic decision in relation to the fact that everything about this movie is so surreal. Even her desire to want to be in a room with a guy who lives in this fucked up of a place is already surreal. You know what I mean? To begin with, you know. So
maybe
who knows how deep the layers go?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you felt like this was missing what would allow you to feel like sympathetic with the character.
Yeah, I mean, as funny as it may seem, I really do look for the humanistic angle in the movies that I watch, especially when it comes to more high concept movies like this one. If we're going to parallel this to the Time Machine of last week, the reason that movie is so close to my heart is because it's so saccharine. You know, it like there is a particular I find there's a particular fondness to that, like, too sweet almost, you know what I mean, touch with the coldness of the science that is implemented alongside of it. And I mean, like, the temporal paradoxes do not allow him to have a happy ending. You know, it's like, however saccharine you want your humanistic story to be, sorry fella, you know, the laws of physics won't allow it in that way. And I think that that dissonant juxtaposition, you know what I mean, of the universe being one way and not flinching, you know what I mean, in that, and your desires as a human to want to have things be a particular way, is really resonant with me. In this movie, although there were particular times wherein Brundle did try to, you know, will himself, you know what I mean, into becoming more human, it was always from a place of violence, you know what I mean? And not only violence, but the robbing of autonomy of others. Because he wanted, the only means by which he could be able to become more human is by stealing two people, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then making one person, essentially. And I would imagine that in his hubris and narcissism, he believed that because he probably would be the smartest of the three people who would be inside of the body, he probably would still be the one to, like, control, over the whole thing, you know? So, like, the entire thing just doesn't lend itself to sympathy, you know? And, you know, not every movie has to, you know what I mean? And perhaps that is something that, you know, people who watch the movie do like about it, is the fact that the protagonist is so unlikable, and that is, you know, to a particular degree, a breath of fresh air, because so many movies aren't like that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that I lose sympathy after the splicing almost immediately, because I think he becomes very overpowering right away. But before that, I think they showcase a little bit of, like, a relationship between Ronnie's character and Seth Brundle's character, where they display him as thoughtful in one way or another, like buying her a piece of jewelry, or, like, trying to get her to, like, do dinner with him a lot. Like, he seems to care about her.
I would agree with that. I mean, he seems pliable enough, right, that he didn't make a big fuss.
Pre-splice.
Huh? Pre-splice, yes. Pre-splice, he does seem pliable enough wherein, you know, she buys him new clothes, he wears them, you know what I mean? He's entirely resonant to what she wants out of him, you know what I mean? Now that they're actually beginning to make a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
You know?
What did you call that? Domesticating him?
Yeah, essentially domesticating his ass. Yeah, because I mean, it's a bit psychopathic for the guy to just wear one type of clothes the entire time. You know, it's like, how much energy does it really take to think about clothes? You know what I mean? It's like,
no time.
How can you consider yourself intelligent if you can't even partition, you know what I mean, mental power to be able to be, like, for such a micro process, you know? Like, it's I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. I do want to make sure, just because of a comment that was made when we were selecting the movie, Matt said something to the effect of, for people who like that horror show. So just to get the variety in opinions. Matt, what's your opinion on this movie?
I don't like this movie at all. I think this is a bad, like, just from a practical, I guess, I mean, it's all subjective. This is just my having watched a ton of movies sort of opinion, and I think I'm, like, all high and mighty, so...
Matt's watched a lot of movies, so he's right.
So from atop my super high horse, this is, like... First of all, it's not my thing, but second of all, I just don't think it's a well-made movie. The dialogue is clunky and weird, and sure, it's like the 80s, but not all 80s movies are like that, and that's probably a nod to the director and his style, but the characters are mostly unlikable.
All the men are super rapey.
Yeah, the story, like...
It is the 80s.
Jumps along in funny bits, has a dream sequence that turns out to, like, be fake that we can't even be sure of until, like, literally 10-15 minutes later in the movie. And then just the whole, like, body horror stuff. Like, when it comes to horror, sci-fi is probably my favorite, and it sucks that body horror, like, falls into that, both in, like, American and Asian, like, horror cinema, but I just don't get it.
What don't you like about body horror?
Well, I just feel like it's gore porn,
Mm.
you know, like, just to, like, show, like, oh, isn't this gross? Look how gross we can make this thing. Isn't that icky?
I would say it's gore porn mixed with psychological horror, because I don't usually like gore porn, but I do tend to like body horror.
I get the, like, at least I think, like, it really comes down to being afraid of, like, having something violate the inviolability of one's own body, you know?
Right, yeah.
And so it, like, I don't know, maybe it's like a stand-in for cancer or something else of that nature. So I get that that's scary, but I don't have cancer. At least I don't think so. So I guess I can't.
And if it is, it's quiet. Yeah.
I can't relate to the horror, and, like, especially because it's self-caused. And what was that weird Japanese horror movie we watched where the guy, like...
Oh, I do not know what that was called. I wish I could name drop it right now.
Yeah, it started with a T, I think, but it was, like, the same sort of style, but they do, like, cyberpunk body horror, and...
Machined.
Yeah, he's, like, shoving pipes into his legs, and then in this one, it's Jeffy Goldblum, like, drunkenly jumping in the teleporter, like, whatever, fuck it, let's give it a roll.
Hey, he was having a bad night.
He's like, I don't care what happens, let's fucking do it. But, yeah, so I don't know, I can't relate to it, it doesn't connect with me, I don't find it scary, I just think it's gross, and I think that there are better ways to be gross, like, there are much more, like, subtle, like, impactful ways to make you go, ugh, like, icky, but not in this way. This movie is just, like, icky for icky's sake for me.
Icky for icky's sake.
Yeah, I will have to agree with a lot of what you said, just because of the fact that I didn't really see Brundlefly really be getting an arc, let's say. You know what I mean? I think it would have been very interesting if he would have gone into the angle that he was talking about, him saying that he wanted to become the first insect politician, you know?
That didn't sound like ramblings of a lunatic to you.
Well, no, for sure. I mean, like, he was already deep within, you know what I mean, the juxtaposition of like human and fly thought, right? So it's like, I mean, like, I just think that it would have been interesting to be able to, like, I don't know, televise, you know what I mean, what he did. Maybe even, like, as a, like, if there would have been some showcasing, you know what I mean, that the world became aware of what he became, you know, just as a means of being able to be like, hey, listen, this technology does exist, you know what I mean? Like, in our reality, we still don't know if teleportation exists, you know what I mean? But in this one, it's been showcased that it is a practical thing, that it can be made, you know? So because of that, this man has just showcased exactly the kind of things that we want to avoid heavily. you know? And I think it would have, and maybe this wasn't a directorial choice, right? But I mean, the directorial, like, vision. But I think it would have humanistically softened it a little bit if they would have been able to use his situation as some, forewarning to somebody else. Because this situation was caused because of his isolationist nature in terms of his scientific pursuit. He had no assistant. He had nobody to keep his hubris in check. He had nobody to keep his jealousy in check. So because of that, something was bound to go wrong. A human can only ever look for so much in terms of fail-safing. And as he said earlier in the movie, computers are stupid. They will only ever do what you tell them to do. And if the computer isn't built to fail-safe, it will just run whatever program you want it to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that initial phase in this movie, like, I work in IT, so we test everything before it goes live. And we test the least risky version, which is virtually zero risk, upward. So even just seeing his process of alone in his lab, like, we've got this up and running, time to try a baboon, gives me heavy anxiety.
But baby,
Honestly,
you gotta learn the poetry of the flesh. That's how you do it. Alone, by
No.
yourself.
No, we start
In a
with
lab.
the steak.
And again, I asked this question early on when he said that poetry of the flesh thing, and we're like, how do you go about coding phenomenological concepts like, you know what I mean? Like the poetry of the flesh. And like,
I mean, I would say that, and I'm not a coder, and I'll throw that out up front, but I look at a lot of it in my job, and I don't think coders had anything to do with the writing of this movie, because even just seeing him type sentences in the computer...
with two fingers, with one finger apiece.
He started one close. He was like, if this, and then he just went, what happened? And it's like, it has to be like an if-then. Like, you have to somehow translate to the computer.
I personally think that just hearing the poetry of the flesh gets Cronenberg all wet. He's like, we're gonna put flesh in this script a lot.
I bet that phrase is probably what woke him up in a cold sweat the day when he first started trying to think about this movie.
It was
Oh, that's what it is.
Oh, that's
It's the
exactly
poetry
right.
of the
Yeah,
flesh.
exactly. You find one sweet phrase and then build a story around it. How will this make the most sense ingrained in the story? It has to happen. Yeah.
No.
You know what? Listen, as an amateur writer who has written, a couple pages, I will say that every once in a while I do find a sentence that I've written that I'm like, oh no, this has to stay. Like, I don't give a shit if I have to
build a whole story.
write around it. You know what I mean? Like, so listen, that part I can 100% sympathize with. I'm trying to see this movie from multiple angles in the sense that, like, I really do want to cover its faults in, like, my thinking, in the sense that, like, is it like a directorial, like, decision, you know what I mean? Or is it like a writer's decision, because I don't know. I doubt that Cronenberg both wrote and directed the movie. I think he just directed it.
But he probably had a hand in line delivering, like,
I'm sure.
Shit like that.
I mean, I'm certainly not going to stand on, like, a pedestal and say that this movie doesn't have flaws. But from my perspective...
Yeah, please don't.
Okay. I think this movie is so wildly entertaining. Like, I think it holds my attention very, very well, and that's usually my first box for movies to tick. And something about the journey of it and the pacing, I just enjoy watching it.
Watching a man turn into a fly.
A little bit, yeah.
Are you like the same
You've seen
type...
what kind of movies I watch. Don't
Yeah,
you sit here and
so
judge
you
me.
like you see the Hulk and then you see him go back to Bruce Banner and you're like, oh, that's fucking boring. No. What should have happened?
I never said that. I like that too.
The green skin starts falling off and he turns into a cyber monster. Yeah, way cooler.
I like
It would be cool if he
psychological
became like a
horror.
super mutant, like.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's basically like, that's, I don't know, it feels like, here's what happens in real life to superheroes. They just become giant fly men.
So
instead.
outside of, like, the visuals, is that your biggest qualm with this movie?
Which one?
The visuals.
Oh, like, just
The fact
it's
that it's
like
icky,
icky?
to quote you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real fucking icky. No, that's, I mean, that, and then it takes like a whole half of a bad movie to get to that part. I don't know. Like,
Oh, you're mad that it wasn't icky earlier now.
It is a little slow at the beginning, I will say. And again, it isn't well carried as a result of the fact that I didn't find Brundle sympathetic, even pre-Splice, you know.
That's fair.
I would have felt sad the entire time he was descending into flyhood if I would have liked his character prior to, but like, okay, like us humans are losing someone here, you know what I mean? Both as the genius that this man is and like the nice guy that he, you know what I mean, that he was, you know what I mean, and like the blossoming relationship that he was having with this lady. But in all reality, to me personally, it felt like the fly splicing just brought out the worst qualities of him that were already there.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
I think that's part of like the beauty of it, because not all of his bad qualities while he's Brundlefly are fly qualities.
And
They're
that's what I'm saying.
inhibited human qualities.
And that's what I'm saying in the sense that, sure, you could say that it could be uninhibited human qualities, but I would say they're uninhibited Brundle qualities.
They are.
Because, like, I don't think that his way of being is universal to all humans, first of all. You know what I mean? He's a bit sleazier than I personally than I personally like my men. You know what I mean? So, so I mean,
I take my men like Brundle.
yeah, exactly.
just how sleazy do you allow them to get?
I mean, just not this sleazy.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me just make that litmus test be. I mean, you make with that as you will, but not this sleazy.
Oh, so Brundle's your line.
I mean, he crosses the line. You know, if he were the line, then I would be able to maintain sympathy for him. But he's already passed into the Badlands, where I'm just like, like I don't really give a shit if this guy even gets shot in the face. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
Please
like.
do.
What about like the evolution of Brundle? Because if you look at it that way, it's not the physical evolution, the mental evolution, because he starts out sleazy. His sleazy qualities are amplified throughout like the process of becoming Brundlefly. And then at the end of the movie, he folds, he gives in, and he's ready to be killed. Isn't that humbling?
What? You think he folds? What?
Yeah, he took the end of the gun and he held it up to his head.
Okay, but see, at that point, I think that's too far. That's like me coming out of a teleporter with my chest coming like up to like my torso and being like, now kill me, because like prior to he shoved her into the pod. You know what I mean? The only reason he feels I will say quote unquote remorseful to the point of wanting to die now is because he broke through the pod and the guy shot it and it didn't successfully work. You know, like all he's doing is trying to essentially once again erase his mistake to a particular degree, because he knows there's no going back from here. So even in that situation, I felt no level of sympathy for the whatever vestige of Brundle might have still been inside of that, you know, Brundlefly, cybernetic Brundlefly, because again, the foundational character is not likable. You know what I mean? So whatever mutation you put on him, if it's especially one that's that amplifies like this one, will only make him less likable, which is exactly what it did. You know, the more he became the Fly, the more he really became just Brundle uninhibited, as you said. You know what I mean? And you get to really just see him. You know what I mean? For like without the primate veneer, essentially. And it's gross, and it's an ugly character, and it's the character kind of saw from the very beginning. You know what I mean? So because of that, I didn't really feel like there was an arc per se, more than a literal. And maybe this is actually pretty cool. A literal turning inside out of the character, where like before.
I think that was foreshadowing.
Yeah,
well,
like where before we see the Brundle in one way, but then we see him we see him in the exact same way, but inside out.
Ah, the poetry of the flesh.
Yeah.
Stop it! I'm getting wet.
I can only get so erect.
Yeah, it's like the same kind of fucked up for the reason of being fucked up like Hellraiser is. Like, just like... And Hellraiser actually has lore and like some like fun story behind it. And this is just like a shitty dude making shitty decisions until it fucks him in the ass, and it's not even the science's fault.
Wow.
It's not even a
I
story.
mean, to be perfectly fair to Hellraiser, I mean, the Cenobites, you know what I mean, are angels of that particular type of, thing. You know what I mean? Like, there is pleasure to be had in the pain that they're inflicting. It's just like, it's gonna take time for you to get it. Like...
Yeah. No, based on your opinion, I cannot wait to dunk on you when we do Tusk, because there's a lot of parallel lines.
Tusk?
Yeah.
To this movie?
Yeah.
Interesting that you would say that.
It's body horror and it's gross.
Well, we'll do that one next for sure. Just to keep in
Sorry in advance.
Tusk has a secret about the movie that you don't really realize until you watch it a couple times.
Okay. We'll get into Tusk when we get into Tusk.
Next time.
But with it being, like, I feel definitely your biggest hang-up from what I'm hearing from both, well, not from both of you, because yours is the ickiness, and your biggest hang-up is not having a likable character to connect with.
Not having a likable protagonist. I like Veronica. You know what I mean? I liked her story, and I liked, as cheesy in 1980s as it is, you know what I mean? It's like a neo-damsel in distress situation that they put her in, right? Because it's like... Yeah, because, I mean, she is, for all intents and purposes, within her own conception of life, an independent woman. Own place.
She's a pretty strong character.
Yeah, own place, high, like, well, mid to high-power job, you know what I mean? Like, she's got wheels rolling in every type of way, but, the men in her life essentially bring her down,
Yeah.
And
Amen.
then...
Speaking of, like, shitty men in this movie, who was Crazy Eyes McGee? That was her ex-boyfriend who shows up
Crazy Eyes
in her shower in the second scene that we see, and then, like, blows up at her in the clothing store.
I mean, she seems to
Refuses
have a type.
Give her house
I mean,
key back.
That kind of...
to a particular degree, it almost seems like she has a type just from the fact that, like, both of those guys seem really, really okay with trespassing her, like, boundaries. You know what I mean? Like, neither
100%.
one of them really, really care about her comfort. They just want to be present, essentially.
Well, and they want to make her decisions on her behalf, too, every time it comes to something that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she likes unhinged men, I think.
Yeah, which I don't know if that is just a, if one could say that's a genuine character decision, or if that's just a concession to the movie itself.
Oh, I've known a ton of women who like unhinged men.
Okay, well, that's good to know. That's really, really good to know. I mean, like, I am really just wondering here, just in terms of, like, what will, like, because, again, from the writer and director's position, right, it's like, what will make this movie actually play out in this way? Like what kind of woman would actually stick around to be with the Fly Man, you know what I mean? Like,
and she kind of threw herself on him relatively early in the movie, having previously not seemed to like him at all.
And
it was like a switch flip.
And do you think that switch flipping is just a means for her to be able to autonomize herself from the obvious objectification that her ex-boyfriend just did to her? You know what I mean? It's
maybe they both started with bad motivation. Like, maybe Brundle's initial motivation was a hookup, and that's why he was coming across as so weird.
Not maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Brundle's initial motivation was a hookup, and maybe her initial motivation, especially with, like, solidifying the relationship, was to stick around for the story. Because that would be the best access to it if she's virtually living there.
Yeah, I would
he's
have
comfortable enough with her to have her filming and asking him questions.
I would have to wonder if the relationship would have continued if he at any point pre-mutation had been like, I don't want you to keep filming me. You know, I mean, like, now I feel uncomfortable about it. You know what I mean? Like, because before she was giddy. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I get to record everything. Like, I will be at the forefront at the extinction of transportation. You know, like, that was essentially the thing that was really, really cranking her gears in relation to wanting to stay with this guy.
Yeah, she said that a couple of times. Like, I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I do have to wonder how obfuscated her own, like, sentimentalities were to this guy. You know what I mean in terms of that. Like, sure, you know, I'm sure that, she, you know, viscerally seeing the man that you used to, like, quasi like to love, you know what I mean, become this monstrous thing. You know,
I don't think we even ever hear them say that they love each other. And it's not clear how much time passes that they're in some sort of a relationship.
yeah, the movie is very, very poor at letting us, giving us any hint of how much time actually goes by.
Yeah,
You know,
because
it's
we
like,
could see, we got some hints, like he was wearing new clothes that we didn't see her pick up in the store.
mm-hmm.
That wasn't his, like, go-to outfit or
Yeah.
whatever. But I don't know, like, I didn't get a lot of indication that the relationship had gotten very serious, because even when she says something about, like, a getaway, a vacation for them, he's like, is this a romance?
I don't know, maybe things just work different in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
Yeah.
no more Brooklyn call-outs.
Things are weird in Brooklyn.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if the past couple movies have shown us anything, that's the most certainly in New York City is not the place to be if you want a normal life.
No, dude. There's Ghostbusters and fucking
Yeah.
Mario
everything.
Brothers.
Dimensional warp pipes to Koopa Town,
Yeah.
and you never know when a time traveler might just pop up on an alleyway, and it's too many things.
It's a spooky town. That's
yeah,
for sure.
most certainly. Yeah.
But pretty progressive movie, I'm thinking, in terms of like the pro-life, pro-choice movement with the abortion pushback and push forward with Brundlefly's baby, or potentially.
I would love it if this movie was actually very pro-life in the sense that, like, listen, the only time you should abort a child is if you think there's gonna be like a half fly, like a half splice.
Only if it's
Only-
a half fly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
That's
only
an
a
abomination.
butterfly, so
Yeah.
The conservatives have their pens ready. Okay, we'll do the half fly.
Yeah,
then.
that's okay. That's where we draw the line.
That's okay. Okay, you made your point.
All right, Cronenberg, I see you.
No, the conservatives would be like, you had premarital sex, so you get what you get. This is
You
the
get what you-
consequence
yeah.
of your actions.
You gotta raise the fly baby. That's
Woofda.
what there is to it.
You know, it really bothers me, and that's what I was gonna say earlier that I kept to myself. It really bothers me that as much body horror as goes into this movie, they didn't bother to give him fucking wings. Like, I can't believe
Yeah.
that in a movie called The Fly, they wouldn't allow the main protagonist who's turning into a fly to fly with sweet ass like macro wings. Because I don't know if the viewers have ever bothered to look at a fly's wings before, like through a microscope, you know what I mean, like a picture of it, but they look really fucking cool. You know what I mean? Like
Very geometric.
yeah, like the body of the fly itself is gross, you know, but the wings that they have are fucking sweet.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been so badass if in that scene where he was on the roof listening to them having that talk about them going to the abortion clinic, that's the moment that he began to like essentially like self-metamorphosize even more deeply. And like began like shedding his own skin, you know what I mean? Like he began ripping his own skin out of his back. Pah! Like some fly wings came out, and that's what he used to like fly straight to the abortion clinic. And then she just, and then boom, and then he like would break through the glass window exactly the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he
That's
grabbed
a
her and then
survival.
whoof, like swoosh backward. You know what I mean? And like they'd look upward, you know what I mean? And there would just be like a quick silhouette of him, like, you know,
With like an ominous.
Yeah,
sob of it.
exactly.
Oh no!
yeah, because it's the wings that do that sound, isn't it? Yeah. So I mean, it would have been
So.
perfect.
Yeah, well, that's the fly man.
He was still
Or
in
fly
skin at that point, though, which
Yeah.
makes it kind of hard for wings to be a thing.
And that's what I'm saying is like if like that moment that he realized that his baby was going to be aborted was the transitioning moment that he became wholly primal.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That he shed the last vestiges of his human skin, because that's essentially what they were. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was still the human husk trying to cover the insect
Mhm.
aspect of it,
Mhm.
in the same way that it was in the movie. You know what I mean? But having it then just him come out like even a more fully formed fly. You know what I mean? Because again, I will have to say that the body horror loses me in the sense that it gets to be gratuitous in that the fly aspect never really comes into focus. You know, because again, if you've ever seen a fly's body, it's chitinous. It's got like, layers of itself. It's like exoskeletonous. You know what I mean?
I would push back a little bit just to say, though, that he's not transforming into a full fly. It's still a DNA splice. So it's like picking and choosing which things come into being is kind of difficult because it's he's still, no matter what, going to be half Brundle.
But the machine is apparent. Okay, that's fine. But if that is the case, even thematically, the way that it's going about choosing, it obviously seems to be choosing far more fly than man. You know what I mean? Because if you're thinking about like the splicing of a fly and a human together, a fucking fly is so tiny in comparison to, you know what I mean, the gigantic organism that is a human. You know what I mean? So I already feel that it's already pushing the bounds of believability, even from a genetic splicing perspective. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To say that it is going to flip it all the way over to the point that you can see on the screen right now as it's pre-transition.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you on any front of this movie not pushing the bounds of believability.
What?
But I don't know. I mean, like I just think that the concept is sound. I mean, as surreal as the concept is, it is sound in the sense that, okay, you teleport, from a materialistic perspective, you teleport matter from here to there, you know what I mean? And you are expecting one unit on the other side, but you actually put in two on this side, okay, yep. You know what I mean? Those splice together. It's just, I just think, right, that with that level of creative openness, let's say, you know what I mean? You could have gone with a cooler looking thing than a body hole. You actually could have had your cake and eat it too. Because in his transition, in his metamorphosis, he could have always looked gross. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, the shedding of the human husk aspect would have always been nasty. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But I think it would have elevated the movie if once that aspect broke, the other side was like, fuck, that looks cool. You know what I mean? Like, I can't, like...
Yeah.
And that's Mothman.
I honestly have a little bit of a hang up.
Especially, like, the Fallout 76 looking Mothman. Mm-hmm. Like, that is the Fly Man. Mm-hmm. Like, for real. Like...
And he's always pissed. He's like, I'm not a moth, I'm a fly. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get into insect politics.
I don't know who my contender will be. Yeah. Am I a conservative or am I a liberal in terms of fly politics?
Insect politics reminds me of bird law. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Insect politics?
No, those are... I have a little bit more of a hang up with those, I think, because, like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Splice. If not, maybe we do a podcast on that one, since that might check more of your boxes in that way. But it is... hard for me when there's something like that happens and then the product of it comes out being like this perfect thing that's like really cool or functions really well or something like that, because I think that that's something that Cronenberg did that was kind of unique to him, is like to add in that horror of like, this would not be a clean thing on your first go. It would not be pretty. It would be a mess and it would be horrifying. And I think that he's, at least in like the movies that I've watched and the digging into like this kind of topic that I've done, that's kind of something that's a little bit unique to him. I do think we should probably do Splice though, because that gets the interpersonal side of what Jose is talking about, as well as the cool looking aspect.
Okay, that sounds cool. Yeah, I mean, I can most certainly respect the directorial decision to be like, listen, what I'm trying to showcase here is the fact that unhinged and unbridled science will most certainly create abominations if not properly checked.
Yes.
I can most certainly get behind that conception. It's just that from my personal desires, right, and my personal subjective, you know what I mean,
which
like,
you have every right to.
Yeah, well, in my personal subjective decision, I just personally think that the machine, you know what I mean, the way that, especially in the way that they showcased before, the machine was already pretty tip top, in that, like, I think that his initial, like, him becoming like gymnast kind of situation should have, in fact, if another director would have done this movie, that would have been the zenith of his mutation. Because that, to me, makes the most logical sense, right? In the sense that, okay, a tiny, tiny fly propped into the body of a man, right, might fuck up with his skin, might fuck his skin, might fuck his, like the strength of his ligatures, you know what I mean? Like, all of that stuff. And it might even fuck with and it most certainly will fuck with the psychology, because he'll start thinking more like a fly. He'll start, you know what I mean, start being like just more, you know, like in that way. If the movie had decided to be wholly psychological horror as opposed to body horror too, I think it would have still worked in that way, because he could have easily descended even further into the madman-esque, you know, being that he had when he was having sex with that random lady. You know what I mean? Like, it was already showing the level of dehumanization that having fly DNA, you know what I mean, inside of yourself was already causing him.
Yeah.
And I think, you know what I mean, that I don't know, like it just went too far, you know what I mean? Or it went in a way that, in my personal opinion, began to obfuscate those more clear thematic through lines. You know, that's
there was thematic through lines in this fucking thing.
Oh, 100%. There were plenty of them. You know, I mean, again, the whole, you know, taking science too far. I personally thought, that I actually am a little irked about the whole baboon thing, because I actually, when I first saw that aspect, I thought that the baboon that came out the other end, you know what I mean, cleanly, was actually going to begin showcasing, like, signs of, like, say, sociopathy, or, like, really enragedness or whatever, right? Because, like, I was thinking that, like, the movie makes a lot of, like, quasi promises that it doesn't fulfill whatsoever. You know what I mean? And let me just start off from the whole concept of, like, him laying down the meat for her to taste, right? He says the meat tastes, she says the meat tastes synthetic.
Yep.
You know, and that's when he goes into the whole poetry of the flesh kind of thing. And that's when he's able to then make the baboon come out the other end appropriately, because he's figured out a way to be able to make the computer understand, you know what I mean, the viscerality of what it means to have flesh, you know what I mean? And yeah, I thought at that point, you know what I mean, that perhaps, like, the baboon was gonna come out, like, not cannibalistic, but, like, even more predacious, you know what I mean? Like, oh, like, I want flesh, you know what I mean? Like, it was gonna come out, like, hyper predatorial or something like that, you know what I mean? Like, the poetry of the concept of the poetry of the flesh was gonna be taken to, like, to the X degree, you know what I mean, to the nth degree when it came to that, like, way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And I thought that perhaps with him too, you know what I mean? Like, with him, like, splicing into the fly, even with the fly, you know what I mean? That it would just, like, even still as a human, it would just, like, accelerate the viscerality of his, like, you know what I mean? Of just his more uninhibited and unbridled, like, ways of thinking. Like, and maybe they did, because remember, I just told you about the Wikipedia, about the fact that there's a whole bunch of deleted scenes in this movie that apparently are way worse. There's apparently a sequence where this guy fucking intermixes a baboon and a cat together, and some weird shit comes out the other end that apparently no one's ever been allowed to see that scene.
Because the risk was that it would inhibit the ability for the audience to sympathize with Brundle's character. Which I have to stand by them in that decision. We had very little to go on.
Don't go half-ass, go full-ass.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, the guy's already unlikable, so, I mean, you might as well just make him fucking demented. You know, I would.
Why not?
Yeah, honestly.
I would argue that he's a little demented.
Oh, he is, yeah. I'd just go full on. You know, like.
And you only think he's not full on because we didn't go through with the cat splice.
Well, yeah, I mean, it obviously goes to show that, you know, the director or writer who incepted this character obviously considered him even darker than what we saw on the screen. You know, it's like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is from the makers of the movie, clearly, like.
They did not want this guy to be likable, like.
No, and I think that we saw themes of that throughout, like, even when he's going through, like, the body changes and everything that are horrific, he's hyper obsessed with the process and, like, what can come out of it for science or for learning or whatever it might be. Like, he doesn't really experience it, I think, as you or I might.
Yeah, I mean, he never has doubts. He never has dissonance about anything. you know, and this is even pre-splicing, you know, like the man is gung-ho about everything. Yeah, sure, let's chuck a monkey, let's chuck a baboon in there. Oh, it came out upside down, like inside out. Well, that's most certainly a shame.
Yeah, he's not very good at it at all.
That's you get used to the smell eventually.
I got hung up on that a little bit when she was asking.
And she said he said he stinks.
Yeah.
So.
And he said, "I've never been a bath person."
I've never been much of a bather. What? I knew I didn't like you for more than the reasons I already knew. Yeah.
No, but I did get hung up on the lack of empathy early in the movie, pre-splice too, because of the animal experiments, really. And when they turned the baboon inside out, and he was visibly frustrated, and she was like, "What do you think?" And he was like, "I think fuck." And it just, like, to me, it seemed clear that he was mad that the experiment didn't work. And there was no, like, I turned a baboon inside out, and it's suffering.
Well, he did apologize to its brother.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that was... I have a hard
so that
time
makes up for it, yeah. No, yeah.
That makes up, he's mad.
Or at least
he
acknowledges it, yeah.
I didn't mean to.
I didn't mean to kill your brother.
I didn't mean to turn him inside out.
No, but he totally did something completely reckless that easily could... Because that's just it. Like, why didn't you try it with a piece of meat first?
Yeah, it's just unethical
even
science.
Even a gerbil or something, you know? It's like, you start small.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, all life is life, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, if we're going to be talking about the intricacy of a life, right? It's like a gerbil or a rodent, you know what I mean, is much smaller. And especially if... Yeah, it's just so fucking stupid, actually. You know what I mean? Now the more I'm thinking about it, it's just so fucking stupid. The fact that he wouldn't do it that way, because if he really is trying to quote-unquote teach the machine, right, about the differentiations of meat, like, wouldn't it be easier to start with a smaller subject? Of being like, okay, like, recreate this tiny thing, okay?
Like a worm or a...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially, a worm would be perfect, because a worm is so lacking in, in senses, and, you know what I mean, that even if it did come out inside out, you know what I mean, it would be much easier to work backwards with the machine, you know what I mean, and being like, okay, like, do it backwards. You know what I mean? Like,
utility-wise, right? It's like...
Yeah, those baboons can't be free.
No, and you have to then dispose of it, and...
You can't just throw that in the trash.
No, you can throw a worm in the garbage.
You gotta call somebody.
Yeah, and what do you think? He has to, like, hit it with the shovel? He has to hit that up, like, inside out one with the shovel? Because it's still alive, and it's still, like, moving around. You know what I mean? Like,
why wouldn't you start with... Why wouldn't you start with a dead animal first? You know, like snake food, like dead mice or whatever, to be able to see the effect on the physiology, and then
what if he? But then again, this just goes to show how much of a piece of shit this guy is. 'Cause what if he already knew, but he's like, you know what? I'm gonna bring you a fresh baboon just so you can really see what happens.
Yeah, he turned the baboon inside out, and then doubled down and went and got a second baboon.
His brother. No, he probably got them both at the same time.
He got them both at the same time. I'm pretty sure it's probably cheaper if you get a...
If you get
one at the same time.
Yeah, you get another one, so $100 off. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the shipping is a lot easier because they don't scream as much when they're together. As they're like,
they're brothers. So
it's a BOGO.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's even more flagrant because... Not even 2 scenes prior, he was like, I can only transmit inanimate objects. And then 2 scenes later, he's like, fuck it.
He's like, here, let me show you what I mean.
Let me show you why.
Get the camcorder.
Yeah,
this is going to be fucked up.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Listen. Yeah.
Well, and that's not good for his track record.
You know what I'm thinking? When he said fuck, he probably meant fuck as in I can't believe I did this again. Like, damn.
After it was such a hassle to get rid
of
the
hassle the second time. Yeah, that baboon smell does not go away. Like,
oh God, that's terrible.
Oh God, especially if you consider the fact that if it is viscerally inside out, then that means that under that flesh, just a whole shit ton of fur just clumped under it. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, you're right. They showcase a lack of empathy in the character early.
Yeah, this guy is not an individual for whom I feel bad about the fact that he got killed at the end whatsoever, you know? It's like, thank fucking goodness. I can't believe they didn't do it sooner. Yeah. You know, like...
Yeah. And it's funny, too, is like, the story, fuck it, as far as that goes, that's where it ends. Yeah, they kill him, it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
Roll credits.
I I stand by that decision because I think that as someone who watches like a lot of horror movies, I think the cleanup phase of the horror movie is really hard to do and often ruins it.
Yeah.
I tend to like horror movies that end abruptly right after the event and they don't take us through the healing phase or the cleanup phase just because I think that usually takes away from it. But I'm sure that there's a way to do it well.
I will stand right next to you with that on that one because I do agree that this movie is too messy for any post scene to have been satisfying
At all, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That man has 2 stubs now. All right.
So we're dealing with like new like fake limbs for him. We're dealing with emotional healing for Ronnie's character.
Oh, and an abortion that still hasn't occurred yet.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of cleanup.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a better choice. All right, that's it.
Yeah, honestly.
Let's go home.
Cronenberg's like, fuck, like I got like 4 more scenes if we really want to be fucking tying this thing together.
Well,
like, shit.
Do those two get back together now? That
Yeah,
he
what the
saved
fuck?
her
Yeah.
life and-
What's the insinuation here? Like,
He's probably a lot more docile now, missing a hand and a foot. So she could domesticate him up and he'll be fine.
He's less of a domestic violence risk now.
yeah, most certainly. Or even more so because of the fact that he feels even more impotent.
And he'll have a plastic hand to hit you with.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it won't even feel numb to him once he slaps you afterward.
Jesus.
No, it is crazy though, the turn on that character. To have him, we were joking while we were watching the movie that the most unhinged character became the most
The hero.
character.
It just goes to show the bottom rung of ethics that this movie actually throws out for its main protagonist. You know what I mean? That this guy can come out from behind and actually become the hero of the movie.
Well, and
like,
before being the hero, he was like the most reasonable person too. He was like, you're pregnant with his baby, we've got to get that taken care of. And he also showed up at the apartment with a gun. You know, it's like, we have to clean this up. He was the only person taking any action.
Yeah. It just goes to showcase how unhinged everybody else was.
Yeah, because that guy didn't change or get better. He just became the best character
by default.
Yeah,
The
by
only
the
thing...
other characters devolving.
The only way I can be the best man is if literally everyone else becomes subhuman.
The only thing that could kill a sociopath is a sociopath.
Without fly stuff in its DNA.
I've been swatting flies all goddamn day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, fuck.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think I liked the movie. Just from the perspective of not liking the protagonist.
But were you entertained?
I was, yes. I was entertained. The movie was most certainly entertaining. There were the actual props were really, really fucking cool. I thought that the teleporter itself was a very, very cool practical effect.
Yes, and it was foreshadowing, I think. I like the visuals and the props. I feel like they did very well keeping a theme with that. And I liked that the actual teleporters looked kind of bug or hive-like.
Yeah, they did. They already looked like a chrysalis almost. Like, that a fly would come out of like that. Yeah, that is a really cool conception to think.
That is the one thing I'll give this movie is cool set piece.
Yeah.
And I like movies
minimal.
that take place mostly in one scene too. Like it really grounds the story.
Yeah, and with few characters, I tend to like that too.
Yeah. Yeah, few small cast, cool set piece. Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum are awesome. Obviously.
Performances were very good, I think. Not always the dialogue, but as in terms of bringing it, I thought that they did well. So
I mean, Jeff Goldblum was really hot in this movie.
He's smoking.
Yeah, honestly.
The
I was
hair
like,
was
okay,
fantastic.
it's this movie that made him like be the sex symbol that he was like throughout, like, you know what I mean, into the Jurassic Park.
Jurassic
you know what I
Park 2, yep.
mean? Yeah, like into the 9 years
I'm
later.
sure
with
they
Jurassic
had him
Park.
oiled up for most of it too. They did a lot of cool
Especially
lighting.
after he came out of the fucking pod. I was like, he was not this fucking ripped before he went into that pod.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, like he came on, his fucking shoulder bones were like perfectly like
lighting was
like
great.
everything. Yeah, again, lighting, fellas. You know what I mean? Like if you're gonna take pictures, all right, like be sure to get a good individual who knows how to do the lighting, because they can take an ugly mug and really make it, you know, really make it shine in that way.
Are you calling Jeff Goldblum an ugly mug?
No, not whatsoever. I'm saying just in general, whoever might be listening, because I'm just as a callback to like that whole, you know, the one I love, where you were talking about what makes like the doppelganger look good, and we were like, it's just lighting. It's like they just they literally just brighten up the room like where he's at. You know what I mean? And they make him stand straight. Like,
yeah. The no
like, look, you look
slouching.
hotter now. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Pick your chin up a little bit.
yeah, exactly. Take off those fucking glasses. All right.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and they definitely did idealize him.
Mm-hmm.
Post splice.
Yeah, they fixed his teeth up, or somebody did.
Yeah.
His agent, probably.
So you don't like the movie. Where does that put it on like a 5-star rating? Like, how much do you not like the movie?
It's tough to say, because, I mean, I understand what the movie's trying to go for, you know, and even though it's not my cup of tea, I can most certainly see how it became a cult, like such a cult hit, you know, because I can see the notes it's hitting, you know what I mean? It's not, it's not a, you know, if we're going to think about it like a song, right, it's not a jumble of noise, you know what I mean? It's just not the kind of music that I listen to, you know, and because of that, I gotta give it a 3 out of 5. You know, it's above average. You know, the set pieces are above average. The acting is above average. I really do. I'm always a big sucker for practical effects, and this movie was big on the practical effects. I don't like. I mean, it loses 2 full stars, and they are dim as a black hole. You know what I mean? For me, because of the characterization. You know what I mean? And because of the lack of sympathy that I had for the main protagonist, and anybody really he came into contact with. You know, so I will say that the movie is a cinematographical, you know, above average, but it most certainly isn't exceptional relative to the kind of movies that I like. You know, yeah. I can't say that it's a bad movie, because, I mean, so much of the movie was very well done. And again, you know, like, there are so many types of genres of music that I know that when I listen to a song that I don't like, I'm like, fuck, I get why people like, you know, I get why people like that, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at. Like, I most certainly and would never want to be dismissive as to why it is that others, you know, like things as they do, and especially if I can see it, you know, but, you know, if I'm being honest with myself, that's the reason why I would have to go with, you know, with the fact that it is 3 out of 5 from a very, very technical perspective, you know.
Yeah, I probably probably float around 2-ish stars, and they all like they both of them ride on this line of thinking of like, years ago, if somebody would have told me or asked me, hey, do you want to watch this movie? And I'm like, what's it about? And they're like, it's about Jeff Goldblum slowly turning into a fly. I'm like, yeah, I'll probably watch that movie, you know? And that's about what it delivers.
I'm a lot more generous for this movie, as you guys know, but I think my criteria is a little bit different. As someone who watches a lot of movies and a lot of horror movies and psychological horrors, my biggest qualm with movies is being forgettable. And so, like, my number one thing that makes me initially like a movie is when I watch it and I'm like, I will not forget this movie. This movie is in my brain now. And I can reference back to it years later. So I would give this movie a 4, mostly because for me this movie is unforgettable.
And what's that loss of star from you?
The loss of, I mean, the obvious flaws we talked about. I
Okay.
won't stand here and say that I think it's a perfect movie. I think a 5 is hard-earned rating.
I don't know. I don't think a 5 necessarily necessitates it any form of perfection. You know what I mean? Because again, we're a channel that prides itself in our subjectivity, right? I mean, we're not over here trying to analyze scenes or any, you know what I mean, any further than a layman would, right? But
Yeah, it's the gap, I think, because like for me, like
I
the
think
movie The
I think
Witch
for
is a
me
5.
like 5 out of 5 movies are like the are like your choice of like desert island movie. You know what I mean? Like that's what a 5 out of 5
Yeah,
movie
yep.
is in my mind. It's like, okay, like 5 movies that you would most certainly have to get stuck on an island with. Those are 5 out of 5 because you know that, you know,
Yep.
like obviously the movie will. I mean, no, nothing is fucking perfect. There's nothing on this earth, you know what I mean, that has ever been that has ever touched ground that has actually been perfect for every, you know, for every type of taste, you know. And aside from water, maybe, and even some people don't like water. They have to add fucking sugar and shit to it to like drink it, like.
Yeah.
So it's like
subhumans is what they.
Yeah.
No, I'm
No,
just kidding.
I think we're on the exact same sentiment. It's because there are movies in my head to
Okay.
me that are clear 5s, and I don't
I
think
just
this
want
is
to I just want to
same
make sure
level.
that you're not just downgrading the movie to a 4 if it is a personal 5 just because of like, you know, the
No.
ratings that we're going by right now.
No,
You know what I mean? I
it's
just want to
not.
make that clear.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, and that's totally fair. For me, I don't think it is a personal 5. I do think it's a 4.
Yeah, because for example, for me, a 5 out of 5 movie, you know, is Pootie Tang.
Pootie
And I'm not about to sit here and try to defend that movie as some sort of superlative masterpiece or nothing like that. But that movie is a 5 out of 5 for your old boy Jose. You know?
Sanate.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's true. 5, yeah.
Yeah, 5 out of 5.
I'm gonna probably go 5 out of 5.
Oh, we're throwing out ratings for unrelated
Just a random
movies
movie.
now.
I'm just saying, you know what I
For
mean? And you can go
comparison's
look up Pootie Tang if you want. You know what I mean? Yeah. Test me.
Come at me, bro. I'll defend that 5 stars any day.
Yep.
And if we ever do a podcast on Pootie Tang, I feel like it's gonna be 5 stars across the board
5
from the
stars.
Lethal Introspection crew.
No. That movie, I could never introspect upon that movie because I've seen it too many times. You know what I mean?
Too separated.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm too ingrained into it. I think that's what it is. Like, I can't divorce myself in the way that I can with these movies that I've never seen before. And like, okay, like the movie's over here and I'm over here. Like, how much of it did I absorb and how much did it just repulsed me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I think it's a very fun exercise. I mean, this is one of the biggest reasons why I love the fact that we decided, you know, we really got deep into wanting to do this kind of thing. You know, I personally gained the most, I feel, out of this whole situation since you guys are the ones always throwing me the movies, you know.
Oh, same.
But at the same time, I think this movie is a very good delineation in my mind as to where I draw the lines in terms of my personal ratings, right?
Yeah, your
'Cause-
taste.
Yeah, exactly. Because if I'm thinking again back just from the time machine, you know, I gave that movie 4, right? And if I'm and the reason I gave it that extra 4 is because of the amount of sympathy that I have with the character. Like his plight is one that even if he is aloof, you know what I mean, and like a lot of life just kind of passes him by kind of situation. His ultimate and foundational desire and quandary is one that is resonant to me. You know what I mean? With this guy, he drunkenly got into that pod, you know, because of a jealousy spat, you know what I mean? As opposed to it being like a for science thing, you know what I mean? Like, maybe you know, maybe if it would have actually been a more innocent being like, I just want to, like, I'm a scientist, you know what I mean? And, you know, and he even said it to the baboon, is like, I'll never, you know, I'll never do anything that I wouldn't, you know, tell my men to do, you know, like, that would have, if they would have angled the movie from that perspective, you know, a little earlier, I think I would have been able to sympathize with his de-evolution, you know what I mean, into the Flyman far, far better, right? Like, if Brundle would have been a great guy, right, brought low by his, you know, by his scientific pursuit and, you know, just the configurations of becoming a flyer, I'd been like, damn, that's sad, you know what I mean? Like, we ended up in a valley and I'm here with you, buddy, you know what I mean? But you know, as it stands.
You're looking down on him.
Yeah, as it stands, I'm up here being like, oh god, he got exactly what he deserved. Fuck that guy. Yeah, onward. Yeah.
Onward.
Shoot him.
Yeah.
Shoot him.
Yeah, it is. I think that's a great point. I think at the end we all feel frustrated when Ronnie's character hesitates to shoot him. And it's because we don't like him very much at the end of the day.
And she shouldn't like him either at this
No,
point.
she really should not.
She shouldn't.
She has no reation to
No,
like him.
I mean
Less
this
than
is.
us.
I mean, when she's holding the shotgun, that's post him chucking her into the fucking pod and trying to make a 3-person, you know, being with her. You know what I mean? Like
her and her baby.
exactly. You know, it's like so.
Brendel baby.
Yeah.
Brendel baby.
So it's like. Yeah, I don't know. Like the pivots of emotionality are a little bit disjointed too. I feel, you know what I mean. Those moments where you're supposed to go from feeling one way to another, but like, that's not. No, I'm pretty set. I don't like this fucking guy.
Yeah, you go right ahead.
I do get a little bit of like the mercy kill feeling at the end, where it's like he must be in extreme pain. Like it's time.
But again, it's all so fraud. You know what I mean? Which
you shouldn't go shoving people in pods,
exactly.
Then.
I mean, what gets me is just his narcissism in the sense that he doesn't see the issue with what he's becoming. You know what I mean? He sees that as an advent of like a new dawn, essentially, kind of thing. But like, I'm becoming a new creature. You know what I mean? Like as opposed to the abomination that he fucking rightfully is. You know?
What did he say? Is most people will do anything to become a new creature or something like that?
Yeah.
And that statement was totally dissonant for me. I was like, what?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's trying to rationalize his position as one of desirability, right? And it falls well within the lines of a more unbridled and unhinged Brundle, because that is what was hiding under the veneer of the human skin prior to, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, that the monster at the end is really just, you know, a physical personification of his nastiness, you know? And maybe a bit too on the nose?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ. Little ham-fisted, if that's the case, yeah.
Especially because, if I'm gonna be fucking technical here, he looks more like a fucking crayfish lobster than he looks a fly. Yeah. You know what I mean? His eyes don't cover a full quarter of his skull. You know what I mean? And he doesn't have the little protruding thing going down. You know what I mean?
Proboscis.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so. Proboscis.
That just keeps shooting out the acid enzyme or whatever. You know, it looks like he looks like a little shrimp. You know, so it's like it just brings me right back to the whole fuck. I wish you would have given him cool fly wings. You know what I mean? Like make the fly aspect more of a consideration further than just the coarse hair here and there and him becoming so gross, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it just it just felt as though it got to be a bit too gratuitous for the concept. Especially again because a fly is such a tiny creature in comparison to a human. You know, I can see like if his back became fly-like. You know what I mean? Like the majority of his body is still human-esque. You know, he even gets the whole cool muscle-like thing, you know what I mean? But then his back just gets scaly and really fucking gross, and it keeps getting the coarse hairs, you know what I mean, over and over again. And then by the end of the movie, he's like doubled over and like big-ass wings like crack out of him and stuff like that. And he is a genuine Brundle fly man as opposed to more fly than man. Because, yeah, again, like I just feel that there's such a huge dissonance in the amount that he got overtaken by the fly. Like, such a small organism shouldn't be able to make such a huge fucking difference to a human creature, especially considering the fact that we already have common ancestors between us, you know? So it isn't like, sure, like contemporarily, I mean, humans and flies have both gone on through just as long of a distinct evolutionary line back from our first original ancestor. but there's still something there. You know what I mean? There's still a nexus somewhere in there.
Mhm.
And for him to have become so fundamentally different, it just feels like unscientific.
I have heard like a couple really, really astute words, I think, that I totally agree with. Like, I've heard the word gratuitous twice, I think, that I think is actually a really good word for this movie. And I've also heard ham-fisted, which I think can also be applied pretty accurately to the execution of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Cronenberg sees a Marvel movie and he's like, that's stupid. I'm gonna make it cool. And that's what this is.
Yeah. I mean, it must be really hard wanting to break the mold, right? In terms of like just wanting to be a director in that kind of way, because it's like there's only so many different ways you can really showcase like psychological horror, especially with the limitations of the technology in the 80s, let's say, right? Where like you couldn't really I mean, fuck. I mean, like the computer imaging that they gave for The Fly and things like that. I personally thought was pretty cool. I mean, in terms of like, oh, this is like 1980s and like you know, fucking the IBMs are like making this rendering for us and stuff like that. So I understand that visually you can only ever go so far from that perspective, and perhaps you know the body horror is in fact a concession of the time, that perhaps it is a lot easier to make him look gross than it is to try to showcase like a psychological descent, you know what I mean, with you know a fly human mutation like that.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe nowadays it would be a lot easier to make a fly rendition that with what I'm talking about, where his whole back is CGI with like little dots and like it's just scaled and it's just like a big ass, you know what I mean, like fly, like beautiful fly wings like pop out of his back, and you're like, and then you're dissonant in the sense that like, okay, like shit, maybe you are becoming like some really cool like juxtaposition between man and fly, you know what I mean, like if you can put on a shirt under that fly, like on top of those wings, you know what I mean, and like live your life, but then just fucking away, like okay.
Yeah, there are some like Spider-Man vibes when like he's climbing around on the walls and stuff. They give us just like a tiny taste of that feeling. Is like, is this gonna be like a superhero thing? But they don't give us very much of that.
If only.
Yeah, because again, like the movie really could have gone one of two ways, in my personal opinion, because I think the body horror was a choice. Let's say, because they could have made him, you know, Patrick Bateman-esque in that way. Again, going back to the whole baboon coming out of the thing, like perhaps the baboon, even though the machine understands the poetry of the flesh, let's say, it still makes it come out synthetic in terms of its like mirror neuron conceptions. Like it can no longer feel empathy for things. Like it just feels like a desire, you know what I mean? Like it, like flesh became too deep of an ingrainment inside of like the algorithm, and like now they only can eat like raw meat or something like that. You know what I mean? And it was, and like, you know, and it could be something that just like with him, right? Like the baboon doesn't showcase it right away. Like he can have the baboon, have it be safe. He goes into the thing. He does the teleportation thing even without the fly, right? And then a couple weeks go by and the baboon goes fucking insane, you know? And then that's when he's like, oh fuck, like what if that's gonna happen to me, you know, kind of situation.
Oh no!
And his narcissism could still overtake him in that way of being like, no, I'm becoming a new creature, you know what I mean? Like this is exactly what evolution and nature wants me to become, kind of thing, you know? Like, and then he just becomes a fucking serial killer or something like that, you know? Like, you know, but again, that's a completely different movie.
Yeah.
At that point, but
it's not Cronenberg anymore.
No, that most certainly isn't. No, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would have felt differently if I would have watched this movie in like 1986. Yeah. You know, like that's another thing to consider too. Is like the availability of other shock horror like this at the time probably made it so novel that you're like, oh, this is that good shit kind of situation.
I also think shock horror like this is very, very rarely done well enough to enjoy. Like I think even now, this is one of the more memorable or easier to watch ones.
Even 30, 40, even 30 years into the future, huh?
Yeah, I mean, we still have good ones, but there's a ton of movies who try to do it that just don't hit the mark.
Yeah. Well, shit. I mean, there it goes, right? I mean, Cronenberg didn't make his name for no reason, right? I mean, like, again, I mean, I don't most certainly don't want to sit here and try to over defend my reasons for disliking the movie, because, you know, even that gets to be gratuitous too. I mean, it's just
Because he had a
not
brand.
my cup of tea in that way, right?
Yeah. He had a brand associated with him. Like, this is a Cronenberg thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's another interesting thing to consider. You know what I mean? Like, as a creator, you know what I mean, how tied you become to your brand in that way. You know what I mean? Like, oh, people are expecting a particular thing from my movie. You know, it's like, so even within the, you know, the already pretty outer bounds of, you know, of body horror, he still has to work within a mold that he's, you know, encased himself into to a particular degree. You know, yeah, it's yeah, everything traps you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Tarantino makes fun violence. This is icky. This is icky violence.
Yeah, no. Yeah, the violence in Tarantino movies is more fun. But it's because it's more realistic, I feel.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think Cronenberg's goal is for this to be fun.
Well, he's having fun.
Yeah, that's what's important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think he wants to make us feel? Like, what do you think, Hannah? Like, what is, like, the directorial desire out of the movie?
I think the directorial desire is that psychological horror and, like, that kind of realization of... Because, like, for me, I didn't really feel this way about a lot of stories until I watched more movies like this, that I kind of got a realization of, like, the dangers of different things potentially that could happen with the movie stories that we follow. Like, they tend to work out perfectly in movies. I think that is, like, a theme that I've seen. Like, we're gonna do this crazy experiment, it's gonna work, and like, what comes out of here is gonna be maybe exactly what we planned, but it turns out to be really dangerous, or it turns out to be a monster, or it grows, or something like that. But I think he's giving us, like, he's forcing us to step back a little bit, and I like that. I think it's changed the way I think about some other movie stories that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, if there is props to be given, I will say that it probably, from my personal perspective, comes from the showcasing of the issue with unbridled science, right? With having just an auteur inventor essentially not have any type of oversight with his creation, no matter how genius one individual is. One individual isn't enough to actually herald a thing as new as what he's doing, especially considering the fact that it holds so many potential pitfalls for misuse and accidents, you know, because all of this was just an accident, you know. If there is one thing to be said that does add just a tiny glimmer of sympathy toward the character, is the fact that, I mean, he only brought it upon himself insofar as he was, like, you doing the experiment, you know what I mean? It isn't like, haha, I'm gonna put a fly in here and now I'm gonna see what happens, you know what I mean, after the fact.
It was an honest and very understandable accident. Yep.
And, you know, one thing that I was thinking of while I was watching the movie, aside from the fact that I mentioned that he's not even using a clean room, you know what I mean, when doing these experiments, is the fact that, okay, you close the door on the machine, and inside of there are a bunch of, you know, molecules flying in the air alongside you that aren't part of you. You know what I mean? There's dust, there's oxygen, there's nitrogen, there's so many other things within that little encasing that aren't you, that when you come out the other end, how does the machine, you know, take those into account? You know what I mean? Like, there's that like to then have the fly become such a clinching aspect to it already, you know what I mean, to my mind was just kind of like already kind of flimsy in terms of being like, oh, now we care about the integrity of the things inside of the pod.
Once it's a certain size and we can see it.
Yeah, like it would have been really cool, and it would have literally only taken a scene, right? If the machine goes out of its way to vacuum seal itself, you know what I mean? Like he has to like hold his breath or like release himself to like not have any pressure inside him to like, you know, burst his lungs, like, and then like he has to hold it for like 2 seconds, and then like teleport, and then on the other side he comes out, the door opens right away to like let air come in. You know what I mean?
Or even just for the preliminary screening, right? The machine clearly does a screening in it because he goes back and reviews what was in the machine.
What was in it? Yeah.
Yeah. Why can't you have like an alarm go off, or you double check it before you get in there?
Fuck
or,
yeah.
Like...
Fuck yeah. Especially considering the fact that you would imagine the machine already understands what a human is made out of, you know, and the machine automatically knew that, hey, listen, there was a fly in there.
Yeah, you didn't ask me, but...
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I wasn't asked. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it just kind of goes, I mean, I guess that adds to the credence that, you know, machines are dumb and they'll only ever do what you ask them to do.
Well,
kind
that
of thing.
people can be dumb, because I think the reason it happened is because he was focusing on the teleportation aspect. He didn't think that the machine would splice something that was in there. He thought it would just teleport two things, probably.
No. He was using the machine as a means to obfuscate his jealousy and his thoughts away from the fact that he thought his girlfriend was banging her ex-boyfriend. That's what he was using. That's what he was using the machine for. Yeah. I mean, he didn't have his notebook. He wasn't writing a log. You know what I mean? There was absolutely no testing or like actual writing down of the experiment happening. He was like, no, fuck it. I got nothing else to do, and I don't want to be a creep that runs off. You know what I mean? And like,
no, but like, what?
Fuck that bitch. I'm going through.
No, I mean, honestly though, what a lapse in long-term vision, because he said many times, like, this is going to change transportation. He mentioned a car. He mentioned airplanes. So probably his long-term vision is that this could transport multiple people, like an elevator or something like that. So why isn't this something that he considered at any point is more than one object or living thing in there? Why isn't that something he tested for before testing it on himself?
Because he was drunk.
Because it's a poor movie.
Yeah, because the movie had to keep going.
Because it all started with the poetry of the Flash. I gotta build a story around this. This is juicy.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure is whatever lab or like college or whatever it was, university that was sponsoring him is gonna tighten up their security on what they're sponsoring.
Yeah, holy fuck. I can't believe that we never, ever got a scene with like some person coming through and just checking up on him.
He said that they didn't. He said they didn't even know what he was doing because he wasn't expensive.
God, that's another really crappy aspect of the movie. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that he just exposition dumped his whole the entirety of why his situation is the way it is. Oh yeah, no one checks on me. Oh yeah, they got plenty of money. Oh yeah, I'm not that expensive. You know what I mean? Like,
it's just hand waving.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm sure you have all these questions, but let me just answer them all right now. You know?
Get them out of the way.
Yeah, exactly.
So
because we're not gonna have a lot of time for words soon.
It's all going to be about visuals.
It's just going to be a lot more vomit enzyme coming out of my mouth than words at this point.
I can't answer your questions if I'm vomiting up answers.
Yeah.
I am glad that they kept the movie, what was it, like an hour and a half? I think that was the right length.
Yeah. An hour and a half too long.
This is good. We don't usually have such a wide spread of opinions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're usually we toe the same line in terms of like the qualitative aspects of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, technical marvel, 1986. I see it for what it is. Pretty cool shit. You know what I mean? The movie thematically itself did not strike any chord with me whatsoever. Did not like the neo damsel in distress aspect that they had with Veronica. I did not like the unethical aspect of him being that type of scientist. You know, I didn't like the weird boyfriend, and considering there was only 3 characters in the movie, that's that's 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing.
Yeah, icky.
Yeah, the only thing that saved it was the set piece, as you said. Like that was pretty much the only thing that kept me afloat in terms of it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, good pick, Hannah.
It's memorable though. I will say that it's memorable though. I mean, it'll most certainly keep me thinking about it. And that's sometimes the thing about ratings is the fact that sometimes things do have to cook in your mind a little bit.
For sure.
So, but yeah, just from a visceral perspective, which is what this whole thing is about, I'd say 2 out of 5. No, sorry, 3. I said 3 out of 5.
Oh, I almost brought him
No,
down
no,
with me.
I said 3 out of 5. No.
Yeah.
I stick with a 4, so our average is 3.
Yeah, because set piecing 1 star, the actual acting, 1 star. The body horror for what it is, I will give it 1 star. But then the actual characterization for the use of the body horror just didn't stick the landing with me to keep going any further in terms of positive grading for it.
I think that's totally fair. If we're not invested, then it doesn't really matter what you do after that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate because I personally do feel, and maybe I've never seen the 1958 type movie like this. Maybe they do it in that one, or maybe he's just as fucking unethical in that movie as he is in this one. But I think that the movie would have garnered a lot more appreciation from my perspective if it was like a scientific accident as opposed to a drunken one.
Yeah, because then it's more the science's fault than this douchebag's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or sabotage. You know what I mean? I would have, if they would have given him an assistant, you know what I mean, that was hey, listen, fucking some director or CEO from the company that never, that never shows up would have been hey, listen, this guy, you know what I mean, everything he knows, you know what I mean, and and it could have been we could, you can climb up the ranks, you know what I mean, if you've managed to be able to find some way to incapacitate him, or and then have it be where he's betrayed by somebody in some type of way, and then his devolution and derangement is entirely outside of the bounds of his consequences,
Yep.
Just small things like that.
Yeah. That's the better version of this movie that you're talking about.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing me the movie, Hannah.
Yeah.
Worth the watch.
It most certainly was. Yeah, I mean, our talking about it most certainly hasn't been the first time anybody's ever mentioned The Fly to me before, and I most certainly am glad that I have seen it. You know what I mean? I'm glad that I can now form an opinion around it.
It's one
and
of
maybe
those...
it will soften as time goes on. But yeah, it is what it is at this point.
It's also one of those that I like the cult classics that I think are good to see whether or not you like them, because then you can recognize all of the derivatives in more modern movies and
that
references
so true.
that I think is valuable.
Yeah. I only ever understood the concept of Cronenberg-esque, you know what I mean, just from the historical conceptions of what I knew his directorial taste was like. But now having actually seen it, I'm oh, okay, yeah, it is almost a trope at this point, what you do,
Cronenberging. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a verb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have to start somewhere, right? I mean, what other movie has he made that's like this? I mean, is...
I think he did The Thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Very similar effects.
Yeah.
I don't know what else he's done. I'm not a big fan of the body horror stuff. I think it's weird and gross. Are you looking it up?
Yeah, I was just checking because I haven't watched a lot of Cronenberg movies myself. Yeah, I don't really recognize any of them that are listed here.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
It's a special taste. The Fly is a pop icon, that's for sure.
It is.
Yep.
That might be just mostly because of Jeff Goldblum, though, too. All right. Well, I think on that note, we've pretty much talked this movie out, unless anybody has any last parting thoughts.
Icky.
Icky. And with that parting thought, we can wish you a good night and thank you for listening.
Yep. Take care, everybody.
Good night.